All right, good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books, and Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're very excited to be here with all of you tonight to celebrate Scene Change. It's a new book by Alan Harrison, and he's here in conversation with Ariel. I should have asked that. Fristoe, right? Okay, great. Neither of those folks are on stage right now. The person you see before you is Markel Williams. Markel Williams is an award-winning actor, writer, and teaching artist based in Atlanta. He has performed for the Alliance Theater, Seven Stages, Theatrical Outfit, True Colors, Out of Hand, Horizon Theater, Birmingham Children's Theater, Weird Sisters, North Carolina Black Repertory Co., the Object Group, Center for Puppetry Arts, Impulse Rep and Theater in the Square, and notable TV film credits include a guest starring role on ABC's hit series Will Trent, one of my current faves, as well as the Disney Plus series She-Hulk, and a guest starring role on FX TV series Atlanta. You can follow him on Instagram at markel.williams to see what he's up to next. And he is here with Ariel Fristoe, who is the founder and artistic director of Out of Hand Theater, winner of the New York Times Best Theater of 2020 and the Governor's Award in the Arts and Humanities 2021. Ariel is a graduate of Leadership Atlanta, Regional Leadership Institute, and Arts Leaders of Metro Atlanta, and a Link Trip delegate. The AJC named her an Everyday Hero in 2022, and Georgia Trend named her one of Georgia's 500 most influential leaders in 2023. She teaches arts management at Emory, and she's going to tell us a little bit more. She's going to come to the stage, actually, and tell us a little bit more about what we're about to see as part of our celebration of Alan's work. So please welcome these two folks to the stage. So you're actually going to take a seat so that we can hear you on that mic.
Yeah. Thank you, ER, and thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Ariel Fristoe. I'm the founder and artistic director of Out of Hand Theater. And our mission is to advance social justice through programs that combine theater with information and conversation. So we have a recipe for everything we do, which is art to open hearts, information to open minds, and conversation to inspire action. And one of our signature programs is Equitable Dinners, which is a program where we gather thousands of people every year for conversations about racial equity and other equity issues over meals launched by short plays. And we've served over 12,000 people through this program already. And we just won the Bloomberg Public Art Challenge to serve a couple thousand more with a program specifically on health equity and racism as a public health crisis in Atlanta. Alan Harrison, who is our author for this evening, I'm mostly going to be asking questions and having him speak, but he's in town for a month researching Out of Hand, which is why we get to have him for this author talk. So we wanted to give you just a little snippet of what Out of Hand's theater actually looks and sounds like. So we have Markel here, who's going to perform just a short excerpt from the Equitable Dinners play on on health equity. Markel, take it away.
Yeah, I just made it back. Mm-hmm. I'm waiting on the doctor to get in. Well, I hope that I think this might be him. Hey, are you the doctor? You sure? Okay. All right. Well, look, I'm gonna call you back, Tessa. Okay. I think he's just. Yeah, yeah. All right. Um. Hey, when I was out in the waiting room, I filled out some paperwork, and one of the questions it said on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your anxiety level coming in here today? Well, my question is it only goes to 5? Because truly, I think I came in at about like a 7 or a 10. You want to know why? You got time? Well, Doc, to be honest with you, it took a whole extra meditation and prayer session and having my cousin on the phone with me to even get me up in here today. See, dealing with doctors and the medical establishment in general is really hard for me. Every time it brings me back to the beginning of my life and the root of my issues with the healthcare system. I lost my mama 5 days after I was born because doctors did not listen to her complaints. Now, I know this because my grandmother, who helped raised me, reminds me every time I go to the doctor, she says, make sure they listen to you now. And it seems like a simple thing, a throwaway line that old people say all the time. But I know that within there, there's a longer story of my mother asking my grandmother to take her to the hospital and a doctor reading the wrong chart. My mother went to the hospital because something was wrong. They didn't believe her. She went back and they sent her home again. And then she was gone. And now all I have are these stories from my grandmother about this beautiful woman that was, well, that is my mother. Her life gone too soon because a doctor didn't listen, didn't believe, didn't value her. I came into this world a health risk to my own mother, and in spite of the many ways that she tried to communicate to those doctors that something was wrong and she needed help, they ignored her pleas and let her die. I've grown up with the shadow of that in my life, somehow feeling responsible for it, and at many times being angry at the medical system for taking her away from me. And now you want me to put my trust into that same system that has done so many things that do not warrant granting that trust. Well, I'm just being honest with you, Doc. I want to trust you. I want to believe I can trust you because I want to live. I want to have the freedom to live, to dream, to thrive, just like those other folks on the other side of town. You know, when you listen to my heart and you ask me to take those deep breaths, I want that deep breath to lead to a sigh of relief that I'm being cared for rather than the worry that it's going to be the last breath that I'm going to take. I want you to care for me the way that you would want someone to care for you or your loved ones. That the quality of my healthcare should be unconditional because I'm worthy of that. I deserve that. And if you and I can agree on that, then I think that we can make this thing work. Well, I guess I should tell you why I'm here. Um, I have a tremble in my hand. Could that be due to stress? Now, I'm not gonna lie. I did Google it, and I watched a couple of those YouTube doctors. Um, I mean, I know you're not supposed to do that. I know, but those people, they sure do seem to know what they're talking about. um, anyway, I talked to my cousin about it, and she said that I should give a real doctor a try. So I can keep it real with you as long as you can keep it real with me. But I guess what I'm saying is, Doc, I need you to meet me where I am. I'm putting my life in your hands. Don't let me down.
Thank you so much. So now we're bringing Ariel back up, and now we're going to bring Alan Harrison up, and I want to properly introduce Alan and contextualize this event a little bit more. So Alan Harrison is a writer, father, performer, consultant, nonprofit expert, recovering artist, and the author of the soon-to-be bestseller, Scene Change, that we are here celebrating tonight. For 30 years, he has led, produced, directed, promoted, raised money for, starred, and failed in over 300 theatrical productions on and off Broadway and at prestigious and not so prestigious nonprofit arts organizations around the country, including the Alabama Shakespeare Festival. He's also a two-time Jeopardy champion, so, there's that. The arts invoke passion, mostly from artists, but nonprofit arts are only successful when they result in measurably positive change among those that need it most. When a nonprofit's donors are also its recipients, then its mission devolves into meaningless puffery, flapdoodle, and codswallow. So Alan is here to talk with Ariel and tell us how we're going to change all that. And also, we're going to hear a little bit more about how out of hand theater already is. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, ER.
Okay, Alan, my first question for you is, who is the owner of a nonprofit arts organization, and why do nonprofit arts organizations have to change the way they do business? They employ artists, right? They provide professional art to their communities. Why is that so bad?
It's not bad. In the main, it's not a bad thing that artists get work. I would like to see arts organizations do what they had promised to do in the first place. The owner of a nonprofit is the community. It's technically the state in which the nonprofit exists. It is a state license, the 501c3, and it is given to organizations that have agreed to take care of some really important things. Among those things, and they list them very carefully in Section 501c3 of the IRS code, which I'm always just astounded that people who run nonprofit organizations have never read the 501c3 code. It's only like 4 sentences. It's not a big deal. But if you read it, you'll find out that the arts aren't in there. The arts are not considered a tax-exempt activity according to the IRS. They do have a separate little list called charitable organizations, but they're not there either. And in fact, there are some very specific things that are there, like, animal charities, animal cruelty, things like that, taking care of the neighborhood, standing in where government, lacks. But the arts don't exist there. Now, I can get to the reason why they don't exist there and why they are, in fact, nonprofit organizations. Kind of dull, but I'll say it. 1954, they passed the 501c3 and the IRS started denying arts organizations their charitable status that they'd had for years. And finally, somebody sued, and somebody said, "Oh, okay, so you're an educational organization." And that's why there are arts organizations listed as 501c3s. But now the chickens have come home to roost. We are now in a time where arts funding and arts organizations just fallen off the charts. And they've been falling since way before the pandemic, and don't let anybody tell you different. There were 12 straight years of arts funding losses before the pandemic. So the pandemic just rushed things along. It didn't make it anything but worse. But what had happened was all of these, especially larger, less nimble arts organizations, the battleships, the venerable companies in your city, whether it's your big orchestra or your big ballet, your big theater, big symphony, stopped thinking about having any kind of effect on their community at all other than producing art. And they would say, we do art for art's sake. Art for art's sake is not a thing. Art for art's sake is for artists themselves when they choose to do something that they're not being dictated to. It has nothing to do with arts organizations. So in a sense, what we talk about is the difference between art and artists and arts organizations. And I have something I can speak to from the book, if you'll indulge me. I think this is it. Yes, it's a little sub-chapter that's called the art that you produce is not in service to your community. This applies to just about every other nonprofit arts organization. The exception The major exception is Out of Hand Theater in Atlanta, which does more for the community of Atlanta than any arts organization in town. And they're doing it on a shoestring budget than the money. So here we go. Art. Art is a tool. It is a means to an end. It is not the end product. If you believe that statement is incorrect, then you need to blow your arts organization up. Art itself, just art, is a good thing, and it's essential. It's essential in the literal sense of what essential means. Air is essential, water is essential. Art is essential because you can't not have art. Everywhere you look, there is art. This has art. Even this phone has art. Anything that's been designed or actually not designed has art. A tree is art. So art is essential by strict definition. So when you say, as a large organization, we produce art which makes the community a better place, you're lying. You're lying either to the community, to yourself, or both. You're not misstating, you're not misremembering, and you're not misinterpreting. Lying. It's equivalent to a library announcing this: we distribute books, which makes the community a better place. Books by themselves do not make a community a better place. They are pieces of paper with ink. They're sometimes bound by cardboard, glue, and paper, among other things. They do not even increase literacy or knowledge by virtue of their existence. In fact, there is a preponderance of new ways of communicating, of consuming the written word, things like blogs and online articles that prove that books do not provide quantifiable or even qualitative data on community literacy. They are books. They are not reading, they are books. They are meaningless unless they are read. And even then, only meaningful if you can prove worth. And art is exactly like that. The art you produce may be meaningless unless you can prove otherwise. So my sense is that the way to save artists' jobs is to change the way arts organizations do their business and to create organizations that are part of the community and speak to the community first before they go out there and do art. Where there's not a single artist vision on what the art will look like, the vision is a collected vision, like Out of Hand, that is about what the community will get out of it. Once that's established and you can set up some impact, in your case, what are the metrics? What are the actions that were taken because somebody saw this play about health for Black people? What are those metrics? It goes beyond the conversation into action. That's what arts organizations were meant to do when they started getting their 501c3s. And that's why now it becomes kind of a horror when they're just doing things for donors. And we can talk about that too if you want.
Okay, well, we will definitely get to that. But my next question, okay, so you're arguing that as charities, theaters, dance companies, museums, operas, all nonprofit arts organizations have to show measurable impact, and they have to better the lives of people in their communities in a tangible way. And
would you expect a food bank to do any less?
Certainly not.
Well, it's no more a nonprofit than a nonprofit arts organization.
Okay, and you talk about nonprofit arts organizations as being non-essential because they do not measure their impact except through audience attendance, economic impact, and education. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that because I think there's a three-legged stool that's been sitting out there forever. I remember when the argument first came up about 50 years ago, before I even got into working with an arts organization, people were talking about the three-legged stool of support.
Okay.
And there have been people who make their living by saying these three things over and over and over again. It doesn't make them true, but they'll say it. So the first thing they always talk about is butts in seats as a metric of success. Look how many people came. Well, it's not a nonprofit metric, is it? I mean, if butts in seats were a nonprofit metric for success, the Atlanta Braves would be a nonprofit. And it'd probably be a better one than most of the nonprofits that are out there, because as I remember, the Atlanta Braves have an entire community arm attached to their business. So no, you're not a nonprofit.
Okay.
If just by counting the people who come. That is I can't even tell you, that's a transactional commercial thing. You bought a ticket, you got a show. That's it. It's a contract.
What are the other two legs of this stool?
The second one is positive economic impact. And I talk about it in here, but I'll just tell you. No, it's okay. You can read it for yourself. It's clearer than me, but I'll talk. I'll make faces at you. So positive economic impact is this argument that people who buy tickets to shows, to your play, opera, symphony, what have you, are also paying babysitters, and they're buying parking, and they're buying dinner, and they're buying drinks. And there was somebody who threw out a number that it's probably bogus, but it sounded right, that the average is $25 per person on top of the ticket price of the show that goes into the community. And then you add that to, you multiply that by the number of people who come, and you can say, look, we brought $5 million into the community. Well, it's crap. Because if that were a nonprofit metric, then any McDonald's could be a nonprofit. Because when people go out to dinner anywhere, not even McDonald's, it's a nice restaurant. What's your favorite restaurant in town?
At the moment, Boca Lupo.
Boca Lupo.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you go to Boca Lupo, if it's just you and your husband, you're either paying a babysitter or you're getting a babysitter. You might be paying for parking. You might even see a show that night from a nonprofit theater. So they're offering just as much as anybody else. Boca Lupo could be a nonprofit by that metric.
Okay.
So, and all you have to do is count the number of people who went that night. You say, look, we provided millions of dollars to the community. Then you get the last one, which is a squishy one. Because it's based in one study that was done a long time ago. It said that music students who take part in after-school music programs get better test scores in math. That was one study. It was 50 years ago. There have been sort of follow-ups, but not really. They're not really good studies.
So this is the education argument?
This is the education argument. See, you learn more by doing. But here's the problem. Whenever anybody says this to me, I say to them, great. So how many times do you test your students before they come to your show? And then do you test them after? And do you set up a series of rubrics that show what it will mean, for what they will have learned from this? And what action will they take from having seen your music program? It's specifically said to music. And the answer is they've done none of that research. They're betting on some national research. And everybody knows if you're actually a scientist, or even, have seen Bill Nye once, you know that national data does not prove local worth. Show me your data, show me that you're actually doing all of the things that you say you're doing. And, then you're becoming more essential to the society. But rather than essential, I would rather use the word indispensable, because that's really what you're aiming for. Essential is a tricky word because it really means air, water, art. That's what essential means.
Huh.
So none of those arguments work. It's a three-legged stool. All three legs are broken. And we have to look again at what makes a nonprofit arts organization worth its stuff. And the answer is to lean on the nonprofit and stop leaning on the art.
Okay, I think that's a perfect segue. So the major point in your book is that nonprofit arts organizations should choose to run like the charitable organizations that they were intended to be. So how can we get to the point where boards, who are the bosses of the people who run nonprofit organizations, where the boards of directors ask about the welfare of the people being served rather than the results of the latest show, rather than asking about how many people came or what economic impact did we generate.
My sense is that we've been just proliferating this problem and just carrying it through to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation of boards. And board members, honestly, I've researched them. I've sent out a questionnaire to thousands of arts board members. And the basic thing I got back is, we don't really know why we're here. We wrote a check and we're here to govern, right? Whatever that means. We don't really know what that means, but we're here to govern. And that's it. So the way that it's set up, we talked about it before. If the state owns your company, the state owns your company because you're now tax exempt if you're a nonprofit arts organization. You're exempt from paying some taxes, but those taxes still have to be paid. So who's paying it? The people of your state. You are, I am. Everybody in this room is paying for every arts, well, frankly, they're paying for every nonprofit, but included among those nonprofits are arts organizations. And we have to think that that's okay. In fact, we so have to think that that's okay, that there's a board of trustees or directors, whatever you want to call them, that it's their job to represent us as the community. That's their job. So that's the first responsibility. You know, maybe this is a good time to mention this. We're making an announcement tonight, and we might as well make it now. Scene Change is available right now. You should get it at this very bookstore. Go onto their website, and I'm sure ER will provide the link. Get it here. When you do, you'll find out that my second book will be released in December, Scene Change 2, The 5 Real Responsibilities for Nonprofit Arts Board Members. It is a handbook of sorts, also has a lot of opinions like this one does, and just like this one, there are a zillion ridiculously funny stories in there because I've had a weird career. That was really the basis of writing that book, was doing that research project and finding out that the boards really didn't know why they were there. They said they were there to answer questions of the, executive director, but they didn't know what they wouldn't have had any of the answers that the executive director wanted. It's not their expertise. They knew they were there to spend money. They didn't necessarily know that they were there to raise money. It's all of that. But how do we educate them on this? Is that the key to all of this and the key to your success as Out of Hand and the people here who are part of Out of Hand? The key to the success is something you have taken to heart, and that is intent. You have to want to do that. It can't be something that's laid on after. It's why after school programs that are laid on after a theater or a symphony has put together its programming is, we could raise some money if we do an after school program. Let's do one of those. Those always work, and then they don't fund it and they don't support it and they treat it like a redheaded stepchild, I think is the phrase. And, but it exists just to make money. And they don't believe in education. They believe in doing their art. I mean, how many times have you heard an artist in this very town put something on stage because no one's ever been able to do it right. I can do it. No one's ever done a good production of, I don't know, King John. It's not a good play. Shakespeare wrote some duds. So don't go see Coriolanus. Don't. Cymbeline, just trash it. Henry VIII, awful.
Okay, before we bash Shakespeare too much.
But I ran a Shakespeare festival. I can tell you the truth, folks. And none of them were 5 hours long when they were written. So the point is, how many people have said that? Moose Murders. I want to do that one because it flopped on Broadway, but I can make it work. And they foisted upon a nonprofit theater company but it has no purpose. It doesn't speak to the community. It doesn't help anybody. Nobody eats. Nobody gets clothes. Nobody has any social justice. Nothing. It's just a play that sits there and ends. And their response is, yeah, but people laughed and they had a good time. No, they didn't. They may have laughed. They didn't laugh at Moose Murders. Believe me, that was awful. But
never even heard of that.
oh, it's considered the worst play ever to go to Broadway.
Oh.
There's books about it. But it's not. That's not the point. The point is they have to take something away with them. Why? Why is this show on? Is it somebody telling an untold story from my own community? That's what what's his name? Robert Barry Freeman is doing at Actors Theater of Louisville right now. He's changed the way they do business and is now just doing stories that speak to the people of what he calls the global majority, which I think is a fantastic phrase. But that's his thing. And it's still sort of his thing because he's making people go to that theater to do it. I just came from Louisville where I spent a month with the Louisville Orchestra. Louisville Orchestra does only 17 performances in their big, scary, kind of like the Woodruff Arts Center hall, where you walk up to the hall and you don't think, if you've never been there, you don't think you're smart enough to go in. They have 250 performances around the state of Kentucky, where they will not every county is accounted for, and several cities in even the rural counties, where they will do music for the people of Kentucky that is the music of Kentucky. So if it's in a rural area, perhaps they'll bring a bluegrass band to play with them. And so the bluegrass and the orchestra are playing together, and it creates a sound that I had never heard in my life. And it was amazing. And you had people in a high school gym sitting on the edge of their seats. No, the acoustics weren't great. No, the seats were little metal chairs or bleachers. But there were people step dancing in the aisles, and this was a concert for them and not for anybody else. It wouldn't have worked in any other place, but it worked there for them. That's what arts organizations should be doing. That's what you do every time you perform in one of these places. You are bringing an art piece to them that speaks to them and that they can take information away and do something about it in their community. It's really a godsend that I found you. So thank you for that. Let me say this. Part of the problem is toxicity. And we talk about that a lot in the book, toxic donors. And, if you don't know, the Sackler family was the family that created Purdue Pharma and put out OxyContin, and their product killed 500,000 Americans so far. They've never apologized. They were found guilty of many things. They were found guilty. I think the amount was close to $1.5 billion. This was not a problem for them. That's how rich they are from marketing OxyContin. And their names, though, they were on every arts building all over America. Metropolitan Opera, Metropolitan Museum of Art had the Sackler Wing. It wasn't until Nan Golden, the photographer, put together a protest inside the Guggenheim Museum in New York and forced the Guggenheim people to take the name down, that people thought, hey, this is a problem. We should really get rid of our toxic donors. That's an extreme example, and you should know about the Sacklers. And you should also know that in England, several arts organizations are starting to take their money again because they're broke, and they're using that as the reason. Frankly, it's not a good enough reason. I get it. It's not a good enough reason. But that notwithstanding, there are toxic people in every nonprofit arts organization that I ever worked with. In fact, if you are working in a nonprofit arts organization right now, and you're watching this, and you're saying, what's he talking about? And I'll say, is there a person that when their name is mentioned, everybody leaves the room? Or when you're going to a board meeting and you find that you're sitting next to them, you find any reason to get up and leave, or when you're asked to do business with them, you just feel a really kind of, I'll use a technical word here, oogie feeling inside. That probably means that that person is toxic. And there are many stories of toxic people, but really the person that you are worried about is that toxic person who is either on your board or on your donor list. There is a company that I know that I worked with actually, where if you gave enough money, you got a separate party room to yourself in this public theater, public building, and no one else could use it. And they hired an armed guard with a gun, everything, to stand outside this private room to make sure none of the hoi polloi got in. Dreadful. But these people, they'll give the $20,000, they'll give the $50,000, they'll give the $1 million, and they'll say, that's what I paid for. I paid for benefits. No, you kind of got to get rid of them. And it's hard because I know arts organizations are hurting, but this will just perpetuate it even more, and it makes it even worse and more elitist than it already is.
Well, what if they're the only things keeping an arts organization alive?
Then you didn't do a good enough job in making your story that you were helping the community. Because people will give to a food bank, people will give to a homeless shelter, people will give to all sorts of charities. But if you're not acting like a charity, that's the reason why you only have the one donor who's giving you all that money. It's much better to have 50,000 donors giving $1 than one donor giving $50,000. Because if one of those 50,000 donors says, yeah, I don't like them anymore, you lost $1 and you'll make it back. That's been the problem. So when you have the situation in the arts where donors are now donating just so they can attend. Donors donate so that donors may attend. That donors are the beneficiaries of their own donation. Is there any other charity that works this way? No is the answer. You might make the argument that colleges kind of sort of work that way because somebody will donate money so their kid gets into college. But maybe you should call Felicity Huffman about that because I think she might have something to say. The point is, when the toxicity leaves the company because you're doing the work that you said you were going to do, and just that, and you've narrowed it to that, and it may be, I mean, well, I don't know, Louisville Orchestra is a $12 million company, you're $1 million. It may not matter what the size of the budget is. It may just matter the intent of the people who work there. And it has to be that this organization helped that person live. Can I tell you one short story and then we can talk about the other questions?
Yeah, then I think we should see if anyone here wants to ask Alan a question, or if
do you mind if I tell one short story?
Wants to ask a question.
So I was just at a performance of the Louisville Orchestra. And I was interviewing audience members. And there was this one girl. Now, I wasn't supposed to talk to high school kids, but I honestly didn't know she was a high school kid. She was just in the goth group. So, you know, it was sort of ageless. And the black makeup everywhere, even in this rural town in Kentucky. Sort of surprised me on some level, but there they were. And so I went up to her and I asked her, you know, why is she here tonight? And she told me that she had seen the Louisville Orchestra last year when they had come through another town. A friend of hers had brought her to that. And she was so excited that they were coming to her high school and performing with this bluegrass band. And she said that before she saw the orchestra the previous year, it was the first time she'd ever seen live music, ever. She was, you know, kind of floating along, really, not academically, by the way. She was getting all A's and she was in AP courses, but sort of floating along socially, didn't really know what she wanted to do and was not very happy about life. And she saw the orchestra and she immediately joined band and she started playing an instrument and she started seeing these people every day. And that was the center of her universe. She said, music makes me sane. I can process music in my life. I understand where the musicians are coming from. I understand the idea of playing together and what you're supposed to do together. And no, we're not perfect, but I leave that room better off than when I came in. I asked her what would have happened had the Louisville Orchestra not come to town the year before, and her friend had not brought her there, and that this concert wasn't happening. She said, "Oh, I don't mean to get dark or anything, but I'd probably be dead. I'd already had suicidal ideations. I knew how it was going to happen. I felt like my life was worthless. I live in a small town where everybody knows me and I know everybody, and that's really uncomfortable for me." And so I went back to the orchestra people. I said, in case you're wondering, you saved a life. And isn't that more important than playing the latest, I don't know, playing the latest version of a Shostakovich piece? Saving a life is more important. So that's the story. Questions? ER has a question.
One of the things that we always like to ask folks is, who are your book sort of models or people that you hope that your book is in conversation with?
I wrote this book for the 30-year-old version of me. The first time I was running a department in a nonprofit arts organization. And like every other 30-year-old nonprofit leader back in the day, I had no idea why I was there, other than I typed really well. I had a good mind, and when I say typed, it was a typewriter. And I had a good mind, and I was an artist myself. I was a performer for years. Performed on Broadway. And I knew that there had to be more to it than this. So if I had known the pitfalls, the landmines that I write about in here back then, I would have had a much easier time of it. And that's who I'm writing for. It's the 30-year-old version of me, or the early arts administrator here. But really, I'm also writing for the donors who may think that theirs doesn't stink. And I'm writing for the artists and artistic directors who have been misguided into this very difficult position of trying to direct, especially in the theater, direct theater, which means they have to go away for 6 weeks at a time, but they're running the organization somehow. It's impossible to do. They have to stop doing that. One of the characteristics of a good arts organization is one in which it's okay to fire the artistic director because of that, but keep them on as a director, and keep them on as an artistic officer, perhaps. But in Out of Hand's case, Ariel is the artistic director, but is actually acting more like an executive who is managing the connecting part of it, while there are two other leaders, both Black, by the way, who are leading the company's programs and operations a lot more. So it's a shared business, but Ariel's not directing any plays and running away for 6 weeks at a time. When she runs away, it's to go to Harvard to have they have your case study talked about at the Harvard Business School, or she's going to the University of Michigan to do an equitable dinners there to show them how it's done. So she's in demand that way, but it doesn't stop her from running the company. In many theaters, mostly theaters, symphonies are a little different, and the music conductor might also be the music director and might also be the face of the company, but they generally are available, certainly during the day. Not in this case. So not in theaters. In this theater, yes, not in theaters. And the reason why it's this theater, and I'll say it yet again, they're doing the right thing. They're working for the community. That's what's important. If they don't get served, they didn't do their job. So,
I would love to answer this question too, if that's okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm done.
So I'm not an author, and I'm not an academic. I'm a practitioner, but I spent a lot more time researching and reading the work of researchers and people like Alan who write about the arts and about arts administration in the last year that I ever have before, because I was asked to write an article for the International Journal of Arts Management, and I had no idea how to do it, and I failed like 5 times before I finally got it right. But I had to do a literature review, and I was like, I don't even know what that is anymore. Like, I went to college so long ago, but so I read all of this stuff.
You think you went to college long ago?
So Alan was one of the people I came across, and the person who I came across who I think is most in conversation in my head with Alan's work is a man named Doug Orwick. So if anybody's interested in like other writing that is like that, in fact, Doug actually uses a word that you just used tonight, Alan, which is indispensable. And his one big thing is he's less funny and less volatile than my friend Alan, I think. But his argument is that the arts need to make themselves indispensable.
I'm not volatile. Other people are just wrong. Is that so bad? Yeah. Okay. Yes. I actually know Doug Warwick. He is. We've had lots of conversations together about this, and we both decided that we agreed too much. We have to find people who disagree with us so that we can convert the others.
Yeah. But then it's been so hard to watch, especially for the last year. Like you said, the nonprofit arts have been in trouble for a long time, but just in the last year, there have just been all of these national headlines about arts organizations closing, or at least like laying off staff, shuttering down programs. And just a couple days ago, there was this headline in the New York Times about a senator, I think, who's putting out a bill for Congress to try to save theater companies around the country. Like it's that bad. So when I think about who I hope can benefit from Alan's work, I really think about nonprofit arts leaders all over the place are looking at like, how do we reach new audiences? How do we generate income? How do we make ourselves indispensable? And so that was why I was excited about your book.
I'm a regular blogger for Arts Journal. If you've never read artsjournal.com, read it. It's a great aggregator of every art story from around the world, from all the different disciplines. And it even talks about people who have either been hired or died or something like that, but it talks about their careers as well. I write for them every week. I wrote a special post today about that legislation, which is called STAGE, and it's some cute acronym, STAGE, and something about galvanizing the economy at the end. It's the stupidest legislation ever written, and happily, it'll never pass. The idea is to give $1 billion a year to theaters, only theaters, no music programs, no arts no, just theaters, $1 billion a year over the next 5 years, because that'll solve everything. It won't solve a goddamn thing. I have talked to people about it. People are saying things like, well, it's better than nothing. No, it's not better than nothing. Nothing at least gives you the shot of getting something later on of true arts funding. This would then shut off that conversation. It might shut off the NEA and the NEH for that matter, because they'll say, look, we're giving you $1 billion a year. What more do you want? Also, your own donors will then say, well, you're getting $1 billion a year, so you don't need my money anymore, because that's the only relationship they have with you is about money. No, it's a bad piece of legislation. I wish people would stop saying, but it'll help everybody. It will help. The money is actually earmarked for the largest of the organizations, and it's a trickle-down bill. So the idea is to give it to the 80 largest organizations in the United States.
I didn't realize that.
Theater organizations. And when I say the 80 largest, it's funny that the League of Resident Theaters has about 80 members in it. But not that I would put those two things together. So they get all the money, and then somehow it trickles down to the artists themselves or to writers, or it never mentions getting it down to the communities. Lord knows they don't need any help. So here's the deal. If you've got $1 billion a year, if you really have that much money you want to give it away. But now let's take that money in the, say, 25 largest markets in the country, or maybe the 50 largest markets in the country, and we'll set it up as a federal grant that localities have to match and build artist subsidized housing. If you can get 500 apartments built in your community that's subsidized so that the artist himself is only paying, or herself is only paying based on their income, you're doing a hell of a lot more for artists in the country than you are by, just giving money to the big organizations. And it will cost about that much. So do that. Talk to me about a subsidized artist housing bill, and I'm in.
How much time do we have?
So we're coming up on time, but we do have a question for Ariel, actually. What is the call to action that Out of Hand is hoping to inspire from the performance that opened the event tonight?
Oh, yeah. That I feel like I should call Adria up here to answer that question, but I don't know if that's fair. I have not mentioned that my business partner, Adria Kitchens, who runs Equitable Dinners, is in the room. She seems to be taking a picture of me right now at this very moment. Would you like to take that one, Adria?
We have a mic for you. DR has one.
So
what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah, no, so that is something that we are not done working out. So the goal of every one of our programs is for people to learn something new about the issue, for them to be moved by the program, and for them to be inspired to take action. And once we're done crafting every program, we try to have not just one, but we hope to have 3 concrete suggestions of things that people can do in the next couple of weeks to take action. Like, for instance, another program that we're running right now is a collaboration with ACLU of Georgia that's about Georgia's divisive concepts law. And so someone from the ACLU of Georgia comes every night, and after the play, we have a conversation, and they suggest, like, call your elected representative and tell them to vote no on this specific bill. Something that concrete, or volunteer for the ACLU in one of these specific ways, depending on what your expertise is in. Here are 3 different ways you can get plugged into the ACLU. But this one, we are so at the beginning of this process that we have not figured out. So the general idea of it is, how can we make people in Atlanta specifically more aware of the impacts of systemic racism on health outcomes? And so we want to reach people who actually work in healthcare and public health. Maybe like half of the people we reach, we hope, are people who are actually, their professional decisions in every day are impacting those health outcomes. But then we also want to reach people who are affected by those health outcomes, so my hope is that people can be more aware of, when I'm going to a doctor's visit, or I'm making a decision about something about my health, I can be more aware of, this is how systemic racism is impacting me, and here's a tool that I have in my toolkit to help me combat that, so I can help close that disparity gap. But I'm sorry to say, like, this just happened, and so I don't know what
I was at a table on Sunday, the whatever that went to this, the full Monty on this. And I can tell you that through the facilitator, who was terrific, he was asking for, what actions can you take to help solve this inequity? That this inequity that it's racism because it's an inequity that has never been solved, and it still exists. And it seems very sticky and doesn't want to go away. So we asked each of us what we were going to do about it, and asked us to commit to that. So I did my thing. I wrote to my congressman in Seattle, where I live, and I think everybody probably did something just like it, at least something. If you want to talk about better than nothing, that's this much better than nothing, but it's something. And that's what you do.
Right, and this is exactly where we are in this process now, is that when we're building a new program, the first thing we do is listening sessions, and then we do an ambassador building phase, during which we're trying out the program as it's being developed, and asking audience members, what actions do you think you can take? What actions do you think we should take? What actions do you think we should recommend? And then the program will get fine-tuned so that we have something concrete that I could give your listener.
I love that. Caris is a soon to be 50-year-old arts organization, but we often, because we're also a bookstore, we're this unique for-profit, nonprofit hybrid, right? And one of the things that we often struggle with is like, we know the qualitative feeling in a room when someone's life has changed. And so, but that can, as you said, and I think it's an important critique, like that can sound really sort of namby-pamby and bullshitty when you're like, no, but we change lives with our art, right? But sometimes we change lives with our art. Like I know we do. And so I'm kind of wondering how we or we don't do anything, but we connect people in the moment, right? Like maybe it's not, it's people in the room who need to be in the room together, and we make those connections. And a lot of what we talk about at Caris is helping other organizations not reinvent the wheel. So a lot of people move to Atlanta and they want to start something because they think it doesn't exist. And we're like, no, 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 no. We're going to connect you to the people who've been doing this work in your community for a long time. But I find that I struggle even to narrativize that for funders and to be like, this is the intangible work that we do. Or I think it's tangible, but
It is tangible.
it is tangible, but I think it's very hard I find it hard to narrativize for funders because they're like, yeah, but how many people are you feeding? How many, like that still feels like a struggle. And so I hear that call of like, what's the action? But
it's never been asked of these folks before. And if you ask some of them even now, and I get hate mail on it all the time, real live hate mail on it all the time. What are you expecting? We're not social workers. We're not civil servants. We're artists. Why are you expecting us to do it? And then I have to go back and do, no, artists are magical. Arts organizations are the problem, not artists themselves. In your case, you're doing exactly what an arts organization ought to be doing, which is connecting people to information that they can then take away and make their lives better. Now, that's a tangible result. It's just not necessarily quantifiable, but it's much better than, but art nurtures my soul. Well, then how many souls did you nurture this week? And how do you measure the nurturing? Is that something that people do? No, it's not. And it's become on purpose this way of not having to deal with it. Now there are no arts organizations. We've had 70 years to put the arts into that 501c3, and they never have. And the reason they never have is because if the arts were listed as a tax-exempt activity, there's a little company down in Orlando and in Anaheim, California, and in Burbank and all over the world that would be very much like to be exempt from paying taxes, don't you think?
So I think you should name what that is in case not everyone got that reference, Alan.
Really?
Well,
amusement parks are a form of art.
Yeah.
But they make movies that are art, and they do plays that are art on Broadway, and they do lots of art. They do more art than in fact, Disney gave 100,000 meals to our troops through the USO last year. So you guys do anything like that? They're doing more than you are. They're doing it as a form of social responsibility that makes the shareholders happy that they've got stock in their company. But imagine if they could be tax exempt, they'd get rid of the shareholders in a minute.
That's a really good point. We're now in the book selling industry in general having a larger conversation about bookstores becoming nonprofits, that bookstores in and of themselves should be a public good. And that's a conversation that I think is really complicated because on the one hand, like, yes, I think bookstores are public goods in a lot of ways. Nobody makes a profit being a bookseller. Like there is no profit to be had anywhere in the book selling industry. But we have for a long time distinguished ourselves as a mission-driven, independent feminist bookstore that is trying to fulfill a social justice mission, which is different than just like people should read more, right? And so I struggle a little bit to have that conversation.
Well, again, it's not about the book. That's just
right.
Print and paper.
It's about what you do with
but
the
if
book.
you've worked with a child going through trans change at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever. And they're ready to jump off that bridge because they're gender dysphoric. They have no idea what that means. They're just not schooled in it. They are being forced by their peer groups not to, that you're different. They're being outcast. And they read a book and they talk with you and they talk with other people who come here because a bookstore is a community center. And they say, hey, you know what? Even as something as cliche as it gets better, but it's not wrong that it gets better. You just don't know that yet if you haven't gotten to that point in your brain development. So rather than them jumping off a bridge because like this girl at the concert, you're pulling them in and saying, no, you're actually part of a community and here are your people. That says a lot to me.
And that's just one example of all the people who use her.
That's one
we're
example.
Fans.
So,
we're fans
so
of
if you can
yours as well.
track any of that, because there are people who say if data doesn't exist, then it didn't happen. So if you can track any of that, even what's the word I'm looking for when you do research that isn't based on
Qualitative.
yeah, qualitative research on that. Anecdotal is the word I was looking for. Even if it's that, that's something that's better than we sell books. Goes back to the Simon Sinek book, Start With Why. It really does, because you didn't start a bookstore to sell books. You started a bookstore 50 years ago. Whoever started the bookstore, you're not that.
Thank you for knowing that I did not start.
Your great grandmother started the bookstore to make a difference in her community. She wanted to make a big difference in her community, and she wanted to be accepting of women, and she wanted to talk about women's rights. And she may not even have used the word feminist back then, because it wasn't used as often. But she may have talked about the old suffragettes, and she may have talked about the what is to come and why are we accepting this contract of inequality and worse, inequity? Why don't we do something about that? She happened to start it with a bookstore. You want to buy a book? It's the same discussion.
I think that is a great place to wrap it up. So I want to tell our friends who are watching online, you can click the teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy Scene Change Volume 1, our first Scene Change.
That's out now.
From Karis right now. And I have put the link to Scene Change 2, the 5 real responsibilities of nonprofit arts boards, in the chat. You can click that link to go ahead and pre-order that book, which will be out later this year. We really appreciate you watching with us, and it really does help us when you buy event books from us.